where you were born or how you were born, or it was just your condition, I mean, your environmental condition or your socioeconomic condition, or your conditioning, just how much society or how much just your environment in itself has really, I mean, kind of just affected you, or your education experiences, and just every single thing around you. Those are the things that truly, I mean, truly shape behavior in these cases. But the behavior in itself, and if you think about just whether it was a stat that I kind of shared or just this conversation around behavior, it forces the question, how did we get here? If we are students of history, there are school of thoughts that believe civilization in itself started from Africa. If you deepen into things like Timbuktu, I mean, deepen into the North African history in itself, you find that things like mathematics, things like science really originated from those places. So how did we kind of just really start with a lot of potential and just find ourselves in this scenario as the cases? I think 4 key things beyond any other thing, right? If we attempt to just go back to the first principles and just really leave everything that we're seeing and just kind of just go back to the first principles, one of the things you find is the concept of slavery, the concept of slave trade, the concept of let me just call it slavery in itself, was very, very disruptive to us as Africans. I don't even want to go into just maybe the secondary or tertiary impact, but I think at the primary level, what you find is it eroded trust among people. It eroded trust among tribes. It kind of just really eroded the form or the structure that a group of people, a colony of people, typically had prior to them. Then tribe and religion in itself continues to divide us. You find scenarios where people are not really tolerant of each other. People are not really, can't just really get along. And if you try to get to the bottom of it, is either tribe or religion or just something that, frankly, is, I mean, I don't mean to be politically correct, but incorrect, but it's really superficial in itself, because if you think about it, I mean, to the basics, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But, I mean, that's our reality today. Then ignorance leads us. There's a funny saying that says, if you want to hide anything from a black man, hide it in a book. If you want to keep anything from a black man, put it in a book. Depth is really, really missing in our society today. Just the ability to just go in depth and just really, I mean, yearn for knowledge. And that's really part of why I really love what the Ake team is really doing and LS. I mean, I'm kind of just really trying to just really, I mean, elevate our level of consciousness as a group of people. And I think the overall implication on a lot of this is poverty in itself really, I mean, just lives with us, I mean, as the case is. I think I'll leave it here, and maybe Yomi just kind of just takes it along.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Okay, I think the simplest way to say this is that our reality as a group of people is an evidence or a reward or consequence of our behavior and the behavior of our society. So if someone was poor, it wasn't just because of their own behavior. It was also because of the behavior of everyone around them and the society they live in at large. And what we have in itself is a family problem. A family of problem. Do you mind if you go to the next slide? All right. So I think there are other participants in society, but just going to speak about three of them in particular. I think government in itself is often the symbol of leadership in every society. In reality, government is meant to define society behavior and regulate it through laws and the consequences they apply on it daily. But even though we have a lot of potential, we have a government generally that just doesn't work within its means and has a reliance mindset. And that's why pretty much maybe aid and loans are just by default an African thing. I think just a couple of days ago, I think it was Malawi that got a loan from IMF, and there was a huge celebration at the house about this new loan that the continent the country had just received. At the second level are market players, the forces of demand and supply, those who do business, those who create jobs, and because of the example set by government, which is the leadership of society, you also find that many businesses don't want to thrive within their means. So cutting corners It's almost like a fundamental part of the market landscape. Then the last participant, which every one of us belong to, humans, also generally had to live within means, and even had to live with means. And also what you find is just a mentality of what we call hustle. If you ask anyone who was a Nigerian spirit, or you'll find that we're really strong hustlers. But a lot of it stems from, and if you go into any society, especially if you live in Lagos, you go into any other society and it was slower, there was some sense of they were not human enough or they were not fast enough. But almost a sense of humanness in itself gets lost because of the society we belong to. Is it possible to turn all of this around? And I know this will be an extended conversation into the panel, but just want to pretty much maybe share some thoughts that could lead it on. And let me start from science. We're engineers by training, and science and engineering has advanced heavily around the world. And it provides an opportunity to solve some of the fundamental things that pretty much impacts our behavior and prevents us from growth. And I'll say the number one part of it is access. Science can enable equitable access. So even though it may not be possible for everyone to, or for government or the resources we have to lead us to building all of the health infrastructure we require or education infrastructure we need, technology could be a means to provide equitable access to people, or for people for very social needs that will help them elevate themselves, to gain skills, to advance their knowledge, to even have market access. Science can really, really elevate that problem. The second part of it is intelligence. Science, the basis of it is often called ones and zeros. Anything you put in, you get out of it, input and output. But science has evolved beyond input and output. It's evolved to learning from many ins and many outs in a bit to provide intelligence to people. If you all remember the world before Google Maps, and you try to drive around Lagos, you pretty much will stop to ask someone for a direction in every corner. And they may mislead you, you probably can't tell. If you live possibly in a developed city, you probably have a pocket map that you're looking to use to navigate to go from one place to another. But because of the advancement in science, you can now put an address in a Google map, and it can tell you the exact steps you can take to get there. So if we're struggling with thought or knowledge or education, science is a means to pretty much democratize access to intelligence. And I think there's a lot of advancement in that area. The last is direction. Growing up, I went to a science college, and one of the fundamental things you're taught is curiosity, to learn, to research, to try to figure things out. However, that served for me as a foundation of just being an engineer. But increasingly, it's becoming very hard for people to find affordable or good education. And if you recall the last statement I made about your reward and consequences, or your reality, is not just a function of what you do, it's also a function of what everybody around you does. We want so many people to have access to direction. And the advancement in science, deep learning, machine learning, and deep learning particularly, offer us an opportunity to learn and provide people direction better. But I think this in itself is not enough, and there's a combination of what heart has to do in attempting to lead us forward in a bid to address this problem of solving for behavior. As much as science can help shape action, art can help shape thought, and can help inspire a person to believe in something. Art can help shape the understanding of what the person perceives life to be, and art can also help nurture a person into a state. I think in between the combination of art and sciences itself, we have an opportunity to reorganize, recreate, or orchestrate behavior that can lead to economic growth or can lead to better outcomes for people. I'm looking forward to the extended conversation about can we solve this problem, and is there an opportunity in science? And hopefully we'll ask this question again at the end of it. Would we see inclusive economic growth in our lifetime? Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got half of the panel there, and I'm going to invite my brother, my chief.
Auntie Lola, and thank you very much for your presentation. That was excellent. My first question actually goes to Mr. Suleiman. I want to ask him what he thought of the presentation, if you have any immediate thoughts that came to your mind as these two men gave their presentation.
As the lovely slides were passing by, there was something that I needed to check. I needed to look at my data. They talked about all the assets, all the natural resources that we have. Something that they did not mention was that 22% of the global youth population are in Africa. Right? We're about 1 billion people today out of 8 billion, but we have 22% of global youth population. To my mind, that is our greatest natural resource. And that is sort of will anchor my contribution to this conversation, which I was going to start with a little quote that I put up a while ago. He said, people do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. I think that quote is attributed to Matthias Alexander. And to me, the question we should be asking is, do we have the habits that can ensure we see inclusive economic growth in our lifetime? So we are here to evaluate our habits, not the outcome, not the end game, right? Inclusive economic growth is, okay, will Manchester United win the game? At that point, there's nothing left to do. 2-1, they've won. But do they have the right goalkeeper? Do they have the right coach? Have they built the team? If we talk about that, then it's easy to answer the question. Also, there's also a conversation about, is it possible? The key word is possibility. Is it possible to have 2 more Nobel laureates in this room, from this room, in the next 5 years? It is possible. The current habits of the writers in the room, will that lead to 2 more Nobel laureates? I don't know. So for us, what are the habits today? And we were having a side conversation, and I sort of mentioned to the team that, look, for me, there is a couple of things to look at. The first one is, what gives economic growth? What is the most fundamental thing for economic growth? I think it is acquiring the skills that leads to productivity, right? It could be skill as a footballer, it could be skill as a technician, it could be skill as a writer. If the skills are well distributed, if there's no gender disparity in skills acquisition, if there's no geographical disparity in skills acquisition, if we don't have generational disparity, then you're going to have an inclusive access to opportunity. So the first part of it is that, what are we doing today to ensure that people have the right set of skills? I think that the model for skills acquisition is broken, and maybe I'll have a chance to talk about that later. Then the second thing is about access to information, both before skills and after skills. Before skills is information that tells you what kind of skill you should acquire and where to acquire it. After skills acquisition is information that tells you where the opportunities are, right? And finally, it's about access to markets. Because you can have all of that skills. If you do not have access to apply your skill to create value somewhere, then you are unemployed. And I think that is where one of the greatest transformational opportunity exists today. The barriers to market is collapsing. And it is collapsing because it's now increasingly possible for people to live in one continent and work elsewhere. That the greatest thing, and I think Africa stands to be the greatest beneficiary of the COVID lockdown, which put to lie the idea that you could not work remotely and that you had to emigrate physically out of the continent to be able to be part of the global value chain. I can have a conversation around the skills acquisition side, but I think I will stop here. There is something very threatening about the numbers running in front of me. So I'm going to stop here and let others have a contribution to that.
Yes, I had no idea until now. They're actually counting you down here. So I'd love to hear what you thought of Mr. Suleiman's words, especially because I know in your presentation you mentioned how I think 70% of Nigerians are under 30 years old. We have a youth population that continues to grow. So, what do you think about that, and how can you apply it to what Mr. Suleiman has said? This question is for both of you.
Thanks, Aisha. I think I completely agree. And if we had stretched the presentation a little bit, we would have also presented that. But we wanted to kind of just speak about the problem, and we align on it. Our population today, if you think about it, they are our greatest resource. I mean, every organization, every group of people, the people in itself is its greatest asset. So I completely agree. Now, skills, the acquisition, the access to it, the acquisition of it, and the right application of it, as the case is. I think science and technology as well has made that, really easy to conceive, really easy to measure, and also really easy to deploy to people. So I think I completely agree. The right type of skills, as well as just the right media to deploy it.
Thank you. Thanks, Aisha. Thanks, Suleiman. I think just to buttress Suleiman's thought and Shende's thought as well, I think Africa is the most skewed towards the age that we live in. And if you think about 22% of the world's young population live in Africa, every other continent is skewed towards old age. And when I mean old age, I'm not just referring to age as a number, I'm also referring to times, where in a time where we have never seen this level of advancement in science, we've never seen this level of advancement in how ubiquitous the mobile phone is in the hands of everyone. We've never seen this level of advancement in how fast the internet is getting to almost everywhere. And I would say one of the pride of a place like the United Kingdom is its rail track and how it leads almost everyone everywhere in a very precise manner. The rail track of today's world and of this age really is digital. So if by design we have a young population, it means that we're the most prepared for the rail track that exists today. The beauty about this rail track is it gets to everyone's home, it gets to everyone's hand, and if skills were needed, through this rail track, you can now make skill a lot more equitably accessible to everyone. If healthcare was needed, through this rail track, you can now deliver healthcare to a lot more people. Something that always amazes me, and maybe I looked a little closely into during the beginning of COVID, was the healthcare infrastructure of Lagos. For the first time, I was away from my family. I was kind of like trapped here, and I was like, okay, so if something went wrong with me, let me even kind of like check, how will I deal with this? And I started to learn about some interesting facts. Lagos, for example, maybe has about 50,000 beds, hospital beds, for a population of about 23 million people. And so if more than 50,000 people were ill in Lagos, there was no health infrastructure to accommodate it. But interestingly, on the other side, 60% of people who go into the hospital go for basic care. They go for vital signs, malaria, things you can pretty much take offline, pretty much take out of the hospital, really, and put on the digital rail track. So I think because we're the most prepared for the time we're in and the time we're about to enter, it's no more just a desire that Africa is going to be great. I think it's actually possible now. Maybe 10 years before now, I probably would look at this the other way around. I think it's actually possible now to get things to people, whether it's skills, whether it's opportunity. I think the summary really for me is that it's now possible to live in an equitable world because of the digital infrastructure that we have, and it's growing so fast. And it's pretty much the only thing government can control, big corporates can control. Like you can't, the power of a person waking up in their home with a laptop has now gotten to a whole new level. And I mean, I want to kind of like just use that to buttress and align with what I think Suleiman and Shani has shared. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Yomi. And I'm hoping we'll actually lead to this conversation on skills acquisition, because I really want to touch on that. During your presentation, you showed us this pyramid where it was humans, economic players, and then the government. And it explained how at each level you could either succeed or the society can be broken. My question to you is, what drives that pyramid? Is it the individual humans who are making individual choices every day? Or is it from the top? Is it government, our leaders? Are they the ones who have to implement the processes in order for humans to be better? Or is it the economic players who sometimes can operate outside of the system? Please, would you like to go?
Okay, I guess I'm going to have to step back a little bit to say, even though we've itemized all the possibilities, we looked at the resources, we looked at the young people, we also need to understand we operate in a global system, and that what serves the rest of the world may actually hurt Africa, and that the rest of the world works very hard to protect its interest. So let's be clear, nobody wants to see Africa process its lithium into batteries at this point, because if Africa could process all of its lithium into batteries, there's a dramatic change in the economic state of the world. If we could process all of our cocoa into chocolate, it's the same thing, right? So let's not be naive about this idea of, okay, we've got it all, we've got everything, let's just go. So that's one. And the second thing is that we're no longer in the space where people will come in here with Maxim guns and take over the place, right? But they can still come into our head. And they are in our head. And that for as long as they're in our head, we will not make the kind of decision, the kind of habits that we need. So the habits, two set of habits I'll talk about briefly. How do you prove you're a successful person today in an average African country? I guarantee you it ties to consuming something foreign. It ties